In this video, you're going to learn how you can become a full-time worship pastor by hearing the story of someone who actually did it. Coming up. Hey, Spencer here from leadingworshipwell.com, your daily dose of practical worship leading tips. In this video, we're going to be talking about how you can become a full-time worship pastor or worship leader or whatever position you're looking for. Ultimately, we're talking about getting paid to lead worship. So if you're like a student, and you're wondering, do I need to go to college? What does the steps look like? Or if you are a volunteer worship leader right now and you're looking to make the transition, who I'm talking to today, Caleb Holgerson from Worship Leader Coaching, has a lot of good input in that because he's done those things. So I think it's helpful in this process of becoming a full-time worship leader to just hear other people's stories. And so this is sort of a series that I've started here on the YouTube channel. Last time I talked to Jimmy Cooper from Hey Worship Leader. This time, like I said, I'm talking to Caleb Holgerson from Worship Leader Coaching. I'll leave a link to all of his stuff down below, his Instagram, his website, his YouTube channel, his TikTok. Hello. If you're on TikTok, he's got a TikTok. And so I just encourage you, first of all, leave me a comment down below if you have like a specific person that you want to hear their story, maybe another YouTuber or whatever. If you want to hear how they became a full-time worship leader, I'm looking for more people for this series. But other than that, grab a cup of coffee. This is sort of a lengthy conversation. Maybe grab some Twizzlers. Hello. And let's get into it. Let's talk to Caleb Holgerson and hear how he became a full-time worship pastor. Caleb, how are you doing today?
I'm well. It's good to be here. Thanks for
Good. This is actually the second time we've recorded this intro because Caleb had someone mowing their lawn right outside his house, and then I had the train go by my house. So it's good to see you again after like 2 seconds, Caleb. Hey, I just want to hear your story today of how you became a worship leader. I feel like it's helpful for people to hear other people's stories. There's kind of two sets of people that I get the question from of how do I become a full-time worship pastor. It's either kids who are just about to go to, or maybe they don't like being called kids, young adults who are just about to go to college and they are wondering what they should do. Or there's also like the volunteers who have been volunteering at their church for a long time and they're wondering how to get into the worship leading full-time position at their church. And so it's helpful to just hear people's stories. There's some commonalities between them, and then everybody's story has some uniqueness as well. So we just want to hear your story. So tell us the Caleb Holgerson story of how you became a worship leader.
Story. All right. So I got started leading worship super young. I was in junior high. I grew up in the church, was always, there. My parents were pretty involved in ministry, and so I was just part of life. Grew up in the middle of the Bible Belt too, so that's part of it too. It's just part of how life is. And so was always at the church, and I kind of started dabbling in music a little bit as a little kid, and then so in junior high, the youth pastor at my church left, and his son was leading worship for the youth group. So when he left, so did his son, and so we were left without a worship leader. And so there was me and one other guy who played guitar, and he was a couple years older than me. He was a pretty good guitar player, a good singer. And so really it was put on him to lead worship, but he allowed me to kind of hang out with him. So, I started leading with him and just kind of learning more about how to play guitar and how to sing. And that was really the big focus, was just to make these songs sound good. And they didn't for a long time. It sounded really bad for a long time, but that was kind of the focus. And after, I don't know, a year or two, he moved away, and it was kind of left on me to lead up the worship in the youth group. And so I kept playing and kept singing, and was able to find a couple of girls that had been in choir that wanted to sing with me. And so just kind of built this little, I think there's three of us for a long time. It was me and two singers, and for probably a year or so. And that's what we did. We just kind of practiced and played. And then one of the girls, her boyfriend played bass, and so she's like, can we have him play? I was like, yeah, why not? We need everybody we can get. And so had this kid start playing bass, and then this guy was sitting in the room one night while we were rehearsing, And he had been, in the youth ministry for probably 6 months or so, and kind of just hanging out. And he was sitting there. We were rehearsing, and behind us on our stage there was actually a drum set, but it was blocked off by just a curtain. And he said, well, what's behind that curtain? I said, it's a drum set. But another buddy who plays drums. He said, well, I play drums. I was like, what? Get up here. And so basically that's how I learned how to build a band. And so we kind of, stumbled into this band, and I had just happened to be around long enough that and maybe the personality too, I don't know, but just kind of started leading that up and really, hey, try this, let's do that. And, just trying to make us sound as good as possible. And so I did that all through high school, was leading this worship band, and, we grew a little bit and got a little bit better, and that was fun and exciting. And I was kind of lucky enough to get some opportunities to lead worship with some other youth groups, because I just knew a couple of youth pastors, and so they would have me come in and lead worship and hang out. And so that was just a fun thing to be able to do. And really, I think that's where I was probably, a junior in high school when I was doing that. And that's where I really fell in love with worship leading, was kind of getting those opportunities to not just, lead in one place or one youth group, but to really go out and see how worship looks in other churches and how other people engage, with the Lord. And so, that's kind of where it started, was, just youth groups. And then after high school, I never thought I was going to go to college. I never thought I would go to school at all. Just didn't want to do it. But I was working in this factory, and we made stickers in this factory. Yeah, real exciting.
Nice.
And so I was working in this sticker factory, and then I was still leading worship just kind of on the side. I would there's, a couple of churches here and there that, get to go lead worship, and then I volunteered at my church. And so I was still doing that. And I was talking to another worship leader friend one night, and said, I really don't want to do this factory job. I'd really like to be in ministry and, be doing that kind of work and be leading worship. And he said, well, man, I can write you a recommendation for, this little leadership college. And so if you're not familiar with the leadership college, it's basically a ministry school with hands-on ministry opportunities, usually partnered with a large church. And so I said, yeah, that sounds great. And so I basically the next semester took off for Texas, where this school was, and was in a worship leading program there, and only spent a semester there because I just kind of realized that it wasn't the right fit for me. But it was a good experience. I learned a lot there. And so, basically was getting to see how, a large church functions. There's a church probably about 3,000 people. And so I got to kind of see, what's it look like to lead worship there, to interact with this many people, to have this big of a team, all sorts of things like that. And so that was a great experience for me. Went back home to Missouri, where I'm from, and after a semester there, was kind of trying to think through again, okay, do I keep going to school, or what do I do now? Because it just wasn't the right fit. And so ended up finding a little worship leading gig with a little church plant in a tiny little town in Missouri. And I found them on Craigslist, actually.
Wow.
Yeah, that they were looking for a worship leader. So I emailed them, said, hey, this is, who I am. This is what I've done. I met with the pastor and his wife 2 days later at a Panera, and we talked for, I don't know, an hour or two. And then he said, well, hey, if you want to come out this Sunday and we'll try you out, come out this Sunday. I said, okay, we'll do it. And so I spent that next summer just leading worship with them, and eventually, realized this, wasn't going to last forever. And the church plant wasn't going to last forever, is basically what I was realizing. And so started, kind of trying again to figure out, okay, what's next. But during that time, I had started taking classes online, just some distance education things that were ministry focused, theologically focused. And so I said, you know what, I'm going to, keep working towards this, education wise, and I'm going to, look around and see what I can find out there as far as leading worship goes. And I kept volunteering at my church, and I applied to internships and jobs and fellowship programs and all sorts of things all over the country because I didn't really know what else to do. So I figured, I'm just going to apply to everything.
Did the shotgun approach?
That's it.
Everywhere. Did you apply in any other countries?
No. Later on, I looked at a couple things in other countries that all of these were inside the U.S., but it was everywhere in the U.S. I mean, everywhere. And I ended up, interviewing at a couple of different churches and eventually finding a kind of a fellowship program in Washington, D.C. I was there for a year doing that, and then about a year afterwards, doing some just like contract worship leading and things like that. But, and then, another worship leading job after that, and they kind of progressed from there. But that's kind of, I don't know if that's a long story short or if that's a long story.
Yeah. So how many churches have you been like the worship leader at, would you say?
I've been, let's see, 4, I think. 4, 3 that I was like the guy.
Yep.
And then 1 that I was a worship leader on staff, and then another, that may have been it. And then I volunteered at a couple other places too.
So where are you at now?
So now I'm in Nashville, Tennessee. I'm the associate pastor at a church here, and it's a church plant we just planted about a year and a half ago. And I moved here to plant this church to help with that. And so I've actually stepped a little bit out of a primarily worship leading role. I still get to have my hands in that a little bit, but it's not my primary focus as far as the church goes anymore. And I'm more in the associate pastor role. But I definitely still get to jump in and lead here and there. And it's a lot of fun. Get to develop worship leaders and things like that.
Yeah. So that sounds like quite a story where you were all over the place. So thinking about that, like, was there a point along the way where like people talk about feeling called to be a worship leader? Do you remember like a specific point in that long journey of going around to a bunch of different churches and feeling a calling?
I never had like a road to Damascus moment, where I got knocked off a horse or got in a car wreck or anything. I always wished I did. I always thought that'd be a cool thing to have some just big moment. Because I hear people with those, and I think it's a cool thing. And no, for me, it was really just kind of understanding my skill level and then what I wanted to do. And so, it was really just more of a logic thing. This is what I'm interested in, what I love doing. Even by the time I was looking for jobs, I'd led worship for 7 years, I think 8 years, something like that. And so I was, I kind of knew how to do it. And, I thought, it makes sense. And I love getting to serve in this capacity and getting to work with the church and getting to see lives changed and to see people, come closer to Jesus and all of those things. And so I thought, it just makes sense.
Yeah. I hear a lot of similarities between you and like when I was talking to Jimmy in the last video, which you can check out right here. That's how you do that when you're on YouTube.
That's impressive.
Caleb's starting to step up his YouTube game. So some tips. So we'll talk about that later. But so I mean, Jimmy's story, your story, my story, like I didn't have like this huge calling moment either. It was just sort of a steady calling over time where I felt like God was just putting me on the path. And I feel like that's the more normal calling that most people feel. Not that it doesn't happen where you get like some big revelation, but I'd say to worship leaders who are looking to become a worship leader, like as a job, like you don't need to have this huge supernatural calling.
Right.
it doesn't have to be some big event. It can just be, man, God has given me these gifts and I want to use them to serve the church. And that's just as much of a calling as any huge event could be.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think a lot of times, when it comes to calling, I think we overcomplicate that, and we want it to be, a place or a career or, a specific church. And a lot of times, I think the calling of God is really about who you are, wherever you are, not, there are times where God's going to tell you, hey, go there, or, do this. But in general, I think a lot of it has to do with who you are and in using the gifts that God has for you, for sure.
For sure. Yeah. And something else I heard in your story, I think you said you had been leading worship for 7 years before you started looking for a job. Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I led worship for a long time. And granted, for me, I started very, very young, and so that's part of that is I gained a lot of experience early on. And so I learned how to leverage that, which is probably something to keep in mind if you are a worship leader looking for a job. Learn how to leverage your experience. I wasn't a full-time worship leader in high school, but I was leading worship enough, and I had enough, different churches that I led worship at that I put it on a resume. I put it on there and go, hey, this is what I've done. This is, these are kind of my accomplishments, if you will.
Yeah, I think that's a good tip, like especially in the church world, like whenever you're filling out a resume for a quote unquote normal job in a normal profession, like you want to have your other jobs on the resume, but in the church world, like so much of it is volunteer, and people understand that. So if you're filling out a resume right now and you're like, should I put this volunteer position on? Like, yeah, put it on.
Well, that night, I think, it'll show, the pastor that you're interviewing with that, you have been willing to serve and to not do it for money. Now, I'm all about, getting paid for your craft and your skill. I think that's a good thing. And I think, I'm all for that. And a lot of pastors are too. But I think I think there is something to say about, I'm willing to do this as a volunteer and to grow and to learn, while serving, and then taking that experience and, offering that, for an actual position.
Yep. So you've been in worship leading positions, full-time volunteer. So since you've made the transition from volunteer to full-time, what's one thing that you think people might find surprising about being a full-time worship leader as compared to like volunteering?
Yeah. I would say this part of this is probably a personal conviction, but I would say that you'll learn that it's more of a pastoral role than you probably realized before. And I think that's certainly a personal conviction of mine, but I think it's something that worship leaders need to know and need to realize is that, there are two people primarily on stage on Sunday morning. That's the worship leader and the pastor. So people are going to be looking to you as their pastor, whether you like it or not, whether it's in your title or not. People are looking at you in that light. And so I think you need to be ready for that. And I think that scares people sometimes because I think they think, that means I'm going to have to preach or I'm going to have to help, give somebody marriage counseling or something like that. And that's not what that means. It just means that people are going to look at you to be their shepherd and to kind of guide them spiritually. And so, be ready for that, prepare for that.
Yeah. Especially whenever you step into like a staff position, I feel like that expectation's more there, but even whenever you're a volunteer, like the expectation is still there. Like it's easier to make excuses and be like, well, I'm just here to play songs whenever you're volunteering. But if you truly want to become a full-time worship leader or pastor, like you should start building those pastoral skills along with your musical side. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So just final question here, like what's one piece of advice, like let's get super practical. What's one piece of advice that we haven't already given? Because we've given a lot, I think,
Sure.
to someone who wants to become a full-time worship pastor. And you can either talk to college age young adults, or you can talk to volunteers who are looking to become full-time?
Yeah. I would say if you are, first of all, if you're in either of those positions, look to. I actually may have said this earlier, but I'll get around to something I haven't said, I promise. But look to serve more than you're looking to sing. So look for places where you can serve and where you can benefit the church more than the church can benefit you by giving you an outlet for music or even an outlet for ministry. But look where you can really serve the church and serve the pastor, whether that's at the church you're at volunteering at currently, or maybe there's another church nearby that's struggling that could use some help. For me, that was one thing that I learned was there's always a church out there that is struggling and that needs somebody to come help them. And why not? Why couldn't that be you? And if nothing else, that may not be a paying gig, but it may. But it's a resume builder. It's actual ministry where you're serving somebody and you're helping somebody, and it's the Lord's going to honor that for sure, and He has in my life. When I've seen, hey, they're struggling, I can go lead worship for them one week, and it may only help them for a week, but it helped them.
Yeah, I just like to point out, because I know people are going to say it in the comments below, like whenever Caleb's talking about like these are resume builders and like I don't know, just stuff like that. Like he's saying it because like not just to do it as a resume builder, but like these are good things to do as you serve the church, and good things lead to good things. So whenever you make the commitment to serving the church, no matter what, like oftentimes if you're faithful in the small things in your volunteer positions or helping the universal church or whatever, like God blesses that. He sees that you've been faithful with your responsibilities in the small things. And so He's going to keep providing more opportunities.
Right. Absolutely. Now, I will tell you that when I was looking to step into full-time ministry, I would have hated that answer. Yeah. I would have absolutely hated that. So let me try and get a little bit more practical for you too.
Go for it.
So if you are, first, if you're someone who is going to school or looking to make a career out of worship leading, you're going to school, you're trying to figure out what your next steps are there to go apply for a job at a church. I would say do go to school if that's an option. Get some sort of education. That doesn't mean you need to have a master's degree in worship. I don't have a master's degree in worship. You don't have to have that, but get some sort of education. There's so many certificate programs, so many classes you can take where you're educated in the Bible or educated in leadership or pastoral skill. Look around for those things and become qualified for the job. Now, we love to, I hear the line all the time of, God doesn't, call the qualified, He, qualifies the called, right? Mm-hmm. But people are going to look at your qualifications. So become qualified, and have something to show them where you say, hey, I do have, at least some sort of education, or I do have this experience, which, equates to this education or whatever else. Like I said before, learn to, leverage your experience. That's going to be a good thing. So figure out what qualifies you. And an easy way to do that is to ask a pastor. Just ask your pastor, hey, if you were hiring a worship leader, what would you be looking for, education wise? What would you be looking for experience wise? And everybody's going to have a different answer, but you can at least try to, get some general things there. If you're a volunteer already and you're like, man, I would really love to turn this into a, career, really turn this into a job, even a part-time role, whatever it is, I would, depending on how long you've been leading somewhere, if you've been leading somewhere for a few years, man, it might be worth sitting down with your pastor and saying, hey, what is this what does this look like? Because I could do a lot more if I had the time. Right now, I don't have the time, and this is why. And if you're going to do that, though, come in with a plan. Know what you can offer. Know what you would need from the church as far as pay or whatever else. You kind of have those things in mind to have that conversation, and don't make it feel like an ambush to your pastor or anything. Like, you need to, to say, hey, this is my vision for the future of this church and this worship ministry. I think it aligns with your heart and your vision, and I'd love to mesh these things together. Is there a way that we can start working towards that? And don't demand anything or anything like that. I think sometimes people get nervous and it comes off like a demand. Don't get nervous. Don't get weird about it. Just sit down and say, hey, I'd really love to talk about this and to see, if this is somewhere we could get to in the future, and you don't have to rush it. It doesn't have to be tomorrow. There could be a 2-year timeline on something, that's okay. And just kind of ask about what that might look like. I think sometimes we get afraid to do that because we don't want to offend anybody or anything. But I think if you can show your pastor the vision that you have for the worship ministry and for your church, he's at least going to respect that. I don't know that a job's going to come out of it, but he can at least say, okay, well, I know that this is the guy for the job when we're ready because he has vision or she has vision. So.
Yeah, I love it. That's basically exactly my story. I talked about that in this video here where I did the Q&A. That's 2 now, Caleb.
I'm taking notes.
Yeah. So, I walked into my pastor's office and I said, hey, I'm about to graduate from college. I want to be a worship leader somewhere, and I'd love for it to be at this church. Mm-hmm. And so that's what happened. So, hey, thanks so much for joining me today, Caleb. Where can people get connected with you? I know you post a lot of stuff online. Tell us about some of that.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, by the way. I really appreciate it. It's been fun. At Worship Leader Coaching on Instagram, on Facebook. I'm primarily on Instagram, though, and Worship Leader Coaching on YouTube. I do a lot of similar things to what you're doing here, Spencer. And so just, tips, advice on leading worship. Love getting to connect with worship leaders and help in whatever way I can.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for joining me. Also, rumor has it, we were talking beforehand, Caleb has a TikTok. So is that just Worship Leader Coaching too?
That's Worship Leader Coaching on TikTok. If you're on there, I can't decide about TikTok yet if I like it or not. But if you're on there, let's be friends, and I'd love to see your worship leading videos.
He's posting a lot of dance challenges and stuff. Right. No, I don't know how TikTok works. I don't have it, but that's all I know. Hey, Caleb, it was nice to talk to you today. Thanks for sharing your insight. I hope to talk to you again sometime. Maybe I'll have you back on the YouTube channel. Thanks for joining.
That'd be awesome, man. Thanks for having me.
All right, I'll talk to you later. Bye.
Yeah, see ya.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Caleb Holgerson from Worship Leader Coaching. Once again, I'll link everything that he does down in the description below, including his TikTok. And if you want more of these videos, make sure to leave a like so that I know to keep doing this. This is whenever I start like a series, I want to make sure that people are just realized like I'm waving this Twizzler around. Whenever I start a series, I want to make sure that people are interested in it if I'm going to keep doing it. So make sure to leave a like, leave a comment down below if you like this series, if it's helpful for you, if you have advice for others who want to be full-time worship pastors and you are a worship pastor, maybe you want to be on this series, let me know and we'll set something up. But until I see you next time, keep leading worship well.